the summer of 2012, Koon Peng and I went on an international service learning placement to Kiringa, which is a village in the southwest of Uganda. We were initially there on an international service learning placement on a literacy program with the Kiringa Community Library, and Dan, the head librarian, took us around the village in our first week to give us a better sense of all the organizations in the vicinity. Now, when Dan was telling us about this one organization, he was really hesitant. He told us that he knew he should take us there, but was really sorry if the visit upset us in any way. And I was really curious about this apprehension. We walked into the office of this primary school, and Dan asked if the directors were there, who he was friends with. And when they said that they weren't, he said, "Okay, guys, let's go." And we were about to leave when it started to rain. Now, in Kiringa, when it rains, everything stands still. If that happened here, I guess we wouldn't all be here today. But anyway, as we waited for the rain to pass, the teachers took us around the classrooms.
And when we walked into the classroom, the students immediately stood up and waved their hands in the air, which is the deaf equivalent of clapping. It was only at that moment that I realized that we were in Good Samaritan School for the deaf. I hadn't interacted with any person who was deaf before, and so I wasn't sure on how to communicate with them. But there was something about that room, the warmth and the enthusiasm that just drew me in. And through the teachers, we were able to have simple conversations and we introduced ourselves. And to this moment, I remember how taken I was by the expressiveness of sign language and how genuine that whole interaction felt. I think I speak for the both of us when I say that it was a truly special moment in our lives. It went so positively that we were again left wondering why our host father was so apprehensive in the first place, and it wasn't until when we were working through that discrepancy that we uncovered the stigma that is associated with deafness in Uganda.
And that first experience was so exciting for us that we kept going back to learn more about the organization as well as this issue of deafness. It was really incredible for us to watch the unique delivery of knowledge that took place in the classrooms through sign. And while the students learned, we picked up the language. The both of us stopped talking to each other so we could figure out all the words that we didn't have signs for and learn them. And as we improved, we were able to go deeper in conversation with the students. They told us their life stories and we shared ours. And we had many opportunities to talk with both the teachers and the directors about the school's goals, as well as all the challenges they faced in reaching them.
So the school was founded by Mrs. Ensamba, the director, who saw how neglected deaf children in the villages were. They had little opportunities to access education and could not develop their full potential. This was largely due to the misperceptions that existed in rural Uganda. And even now, the prevalent notion is that deaf children are inferior or mentally retarded and simply will not amount to anything.
In fact, in Uganda, there's a word for the deaf, that's kasiru. And this also means stupid or unteachable. And last day of term, we were at the school, we were sending off the kids, and one of the parents was there to pick up his daughter. He started talking to us, and I asked him, "What's your daughter's name?" And he scratched his head and fumbled a lot before he admitted that he didn't know. He mumbled under his breath that he was so used to calling her Kasiru that he'd forgotten. Now, this wasn't rare. Often, this word was not just a derogatory term, but replaced their names.
So Mrs. Ensamba started by taking in 2 deaf children into her own house, educated and nurtured them. But she was struggling to find more deaf children in need because many parents perceive deafness to be such a disgrace to the family that they try to hide their deaf children away from the community's view. And when Mrs. Ensamba found them, often through the help of the neighbors, the parents were rather willing to part with their deaf children if that means that they no longer have to support them. So in this way, more poured in, and at one point, Mrs. Ensamba had about 30 deaf children living with her. They would all study in the morning and convert that same study space into a sleeping area at night. she gradually received financial assistance to be able to build a block of classrooms and a dormitory for the students. At present, there are about 10 teachers working with her and about 100 students, of which 10 are in the vocational section. So we take away a lot of things from this trip, and one of which is just understanding how complex the whole situation is. We started to see the several intertwining factors, such as disability, poverty, stigma, communication barriers, lack of family support, that contributed to the present situation of the deaf. Sometimes these factors can even be mutually reinforcing, creating a quagmire that really prevents progress for the deaf. We came to understand that any intervention, for it to be successful, has to address or at least acknowledge all these different variables. For example, in the vocational section, what we discovered is that it's not enough to simply facilitate the skills of making uniforms or knitting sweaters. It's also very important to work with the students to improve their language ability to overcome language barrier and to work with the community members in dispelling some of the unfounded negative stereotypes. However, the complexity doesn't stop there. It's as important, if not more, to include the students in the designing and the implementation of the projects, for them to take ownership of the projects themselves. It is in doing so that the students are able to directly confront the Kasiru myth by showing other people that they can be independent.
And within that, there was also the complexity that came with being international collaborators. Now, as non-Ugandans who were really new to deaf culture, but also as 20-somethings who were fairly new to life, we came in with a lot of questions. And through this process of inquiry, we were all able to reflect on the current practices of the organization, as well as the core reasoning behind them. Mostly this just reinforced the way that they worked. But in cases where there was space for improvement, we were able to bring all our diverse ideas together and come up with new solutions. This sounds incredible, kind of was sometimes. But with diversity also came the issues of power and privilege. As UBC students, but also as Canadians, a lot of our ideas were just accepted without a critical evaluation of their actual feasibility. Decisions were deferred to us. Success was sometimes attributed merely to our presence. And on several occasions, we had to point out that we were being praised or thanked for something that came from within the organization. And we realized this came out of the colonial belief that Westerners, or Muzungus in the local vernacular, were superior both in terms of wealth and knowledge. And this was reinforced by the fact that we could fly in and volunteer our time for 3 months. So it was really hard for us to start to work with the organization, and it took a lot of time and a lot of discussions before we were all on the same plane. The two of us had to be a lot more careful about how we brought up ideas. We made sure that we always shared the plans that we had, but that we also flashed out all the possible flaws that we saw, and that we invited the organization to assess our plans with us so that we could come up with the best possible strategies. In working through this, we found that we could actually collaborate pretty well, and we had numerous discussions and came up with several initiatives. Now we'd like to tell you all a little about 3 of them. These were things that came out of the organization seeing a need for them. And we supported their creation and their troubleshooting. But the teachers and the students really ran them.
So one of these projects is the library reading sessions. Before, the library did not feel capable enough of accommodating deaf students for fear of creating tension between the deaf students and the hearing students. But when we broached about this topic to the librarian, who also happens to be our host father, he was really excited about having the possibility of making the library space more inclusive. These library reading sessions help the students to gain access to reading materials that they otherwise could not. And reading helps them to be able to discern the difference in grammatical structure between sign language and spoken languages. All the very visually stimulating reading materials and videos that are available in the library also help them to be able to solidify their understanding and concepts. But most of all, it's about making them feel comfortable using the library space, just like anybody else.
And working through that project, the library won an award for social inclusion, which was exciting because we had this money to put towards 2 new projects. And one of them was a library scholarship. So the community library already had scholarships for the local secondary school students. And by bringing in another scholarship for a Good Samaritan student, we would sort of bring them in on the same level as peers and encouraging them to interact. And this was meant to make the library staff more okay with deafness, to get the Good Samaritan students to know that they could come and access the library outside of those reading session hours, and that there'd be someone there that they knew would help them access materials. And to the community, it really was a message that the library is a community space, and the deaf are very much part of that community.
So another part of the award was spent organizing a sign language seminar to teach sign language to some of the parents, the students, and community members within the village. This idea came from Mrs. Ensamba, the director herself, who saw how limited communication is between the students and the people around them. So the seminar happened for 4 days, and they were taught by the teachers of the deaf school. It wasn't only focused on learning sign language, but included a lot of conversations on deafness and deaf culture. It was really rewarding seeing how the parents improve over the period of 4 days and how their attitudes have also started to shift. I remember this one incident where one of the parents came to me and he was asking me to help to teach how to sign, "I am your father and you are my daughter." And I was really surprised by that because that tells me just how much they can communicate, before that. But I saw how keen he was on practicing those signs, on perfecting those angles and making sure that he could communicate well with his daughter. And that also signaled a lot of hope for me that, there may just be a change in the family dynamics from now on. And by being able to engage his daughter in more meaningful conversation, he will be able to see her for who she is.
So throughout our experience with ISL, we were told several times to be really critical, and we constantly rolled our eyes at that. But I think we've realized how important that was and how much fun we could have with that. Both of us are really grateful for all the support we've gotten from the UBC community to have this opportunity and for all the relationships we built through this collaboration, but mainly for all the learning that's come out of it. And we hope that through working further with Good Samaritan, we'd uncover new layers and figure out how to better support the deaf community. We look forward to the day when being deaf in Uganda or anywhere else in the world is the same as being someone who speaks a different first language and nothing more.
Thank you.